Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Podcasting is Praxis. My name is Rob. My pronouns are he and him.
I'm Jamie. My pronouns are he and him.
I'm Alistair. My pronouns are he and him. And wow, Rob, you almost fucked that one up.
Yeah, I came within fucking hairs again. Anyway, both David and James aren't here for now. Maybe David will join us later. But in the meantime, we are very pleased to be joined by a very special guest. We have Hussein Kesvani to join us tonight.
Hi, my name is Hussein. My pronouns are he and him. We don't really say the pronouns on our show, but that's not to say that they don't exist.
So anyway, before we get started on the show, I have an important announcement. I'm actually going to retire from this podcast because I want to give my place to Tommy Robinson, because since the European elections, I've realized that it's important to bring the fascist into the podcast to show you, the listener, that they're actually not very good at it. So that changeover is going to happen in like a week or two, just so you're aware.
Well, third time's a charm, I guess.
Yeah.
I mean, in the end, we are all Franz von Papen, and
well, you know, like the way to like truly beat what's going to happen. The sort of logical extension of this is that Tommy Robinson is going to go on The Rest is Politics, and Rory Stewart's going to ask him a question along the lines of like, okay, we know that like what you want is kind of, you know, true proper like fascism, whatever, but have you considered how you're going to pay for it? And then the cool guy glasses, like the Fug Life glasses, are going to come down, and it'll be like all the fucking like basketball air horns and stuff. And you know what? We'll all say, "Damn, bro, you got him.
Yeah, exactly.
It's over.
Yeah.
There's no recovering from this.
As we all know, the main problem with handing a racist chimpanzee a gun is the fact that he hasn't been trained in the field of marksmanship.
Yeah, and to say, like, the last step of this will be that we just rebrand to the rest is Praxis, and then, you know, our job here is done. We're out of here.
That's right. They solved your problem. so you know, now politics and praxis are two separate things, and like what's, you know.
Yeah, we are now all Ian Dunn, and we are going to completely smoothen all of our heads and brains.
What a fucking thing to come back to. Jesus fucking Christ.
Welcome back.
It's fine, David.
Just get done on arrival.
There's no saving him, Doc. Incompatible with life.
Yeah, it's fine, David. Just like go to the bathroom, grab your razor, and, you know, in 5 minutes you can rejoin the pod. You could be reborn.
So I did enjoy Emily Maitlis's completely insane short thread of tweets. I think it was either today or yesterday, about the like big brain machinations of Macron to hand the fascists all of the reins of power, and just let them get on with it, like as though she is a spectator at a football match. Wow, what are they going to do now that they've got control of the ball? Score a goal, I think, but I don't think they've got the skills to do that. What fucking planet am I on?
What's the planet where learning is for fucking cowards?
Yeah, famously the Nazis were terrible at organisation. Just ask IBM how bad they were at it.
But I wanted to... Okay, so now that we've got this important news out of the way, you know, I hope you all give a warm welcome to Tommy next week. That's the most important. But for two, I wanted to start with the most important news that I've received in the last week that I've read. I've read it in the New York Post, so it must be true. This summer has been declared Hot Rodent Summer, so welcome everyone.
I saw this as well, like rat boyfriends or something, isn't it?
Exactly. What you know,
is this about
everybody listening,
looking like a drowned rat in the bath because it's so fucking hot?
Finally, my time has come.
Well, you know, I think that's a, you know, let me just cite you from the article. So what exactly is a hot rodent or a sexy rat? Great question. It is
hot rodent brackets sexy rat.
This must really suck. This must really suck for all the rodent boys who like spent the past couple of years like mewing to get the Chad face, only to sort of now be told that actually what you missed your shot at being like the hottest guy of 2024 for like a short period of time. Like they must the guy who went to, remember that story about the guy who it was an American guy who went to a British doctor, but the British doctor was living somewhere else, and this British doctor was like famous for doing what you call like reconstructive surgery of like men's faces. And he was the only doctor, and the doctor was like kind of dodgy as well. Like he had sort of, from what I'm really hoping, I'm trying to like be vague to like not to slander anyone, but also like I can't remember the specifics.
I remember the basics of the story. To say, yeah.
He was a really dodgy doctor, couldn't practice in the UK, so like was living somewhere else, and like he was known among kind of like a particular brand of the incel community as being like,
oh, is he the Chad Jaw guy?
He can make you a Chad.
Yeah, because he could give you the Chad jawline, like the strong Chad jawline.
That's right. Yeah. And those guys who got the Chad jawline only to find out that like it was all for nothing. I feel for them, man. That's it's a sad moment.
But surely the strong Chad jawline will help you like pull more pizza off a subway platform to impress women.
Somewhere out there's a Discord full of like 10 people who all like dress up as like furry fursuit mice, and they're like, God damn it, we missed our shot again.
Well, to quote the New York Post, it is essentially a lanky man over someone more bulky. It's someone with sunken eyes and pale skin that scurries around instead of walking with purpose. Essentially, it is the opposite of a finance bro.
Would you say?
I don't know if that's true though. Like I don't like our sort of studio isn't that far away from like the financial district of London, and so I've got to like walk through there I have to like walk through there quite a lot of the time to sort of get home. And a lot of those finance guys do have like quite rat-like faces, which is not like, again, I don't want to be like coming on your show and being like, let's do like physiognomy and stuff like that, right? Like I'm not. The calipers are somewhere in my house, but I'm not sure where they are. But like I wouldn't like describe them as sort of being the antithesis of the finance bro by like their looks alone, because there are definitely some rat boys who are in finance.
Mr. Beast. Just look at Mr. Beast. He's nothing but finance, and he looks most like a fucking rat than anyone else.
Finally,
I think he looks more like a beaver. I think he's like more of a beaver guy than a rat guy.
A beaver,
don't you think? Like he looks more like a chipmunk or fucking what's it called? Like it's not. They're sort of a seal. Yeah, he looks more like a seal, I think, than a rat.
Well, apparently, according to this important article that I read, the celebrities most associated with, hot rodent summer are Jeremy Allen White of the Bear.
What, the Bear? What the fuck? Did we
Timothy
watch the same
Chalamet
TV show?
Yeah, Timothée Chalamet.
Did they watch Mouse Hunt instead? What the fuck is going on?
And like
this is also really weird. Sorry to interrupt, but I'm like, no. I'm gonna refute the argument that Jeremy Allen White is a rat boy, partly because like when remember those Calvin Klein ads that came out, and like it sort of started off this whole discourse around like objectifying men and everything, which is kind of boring. But in these photos, like the thing that he was sort of compared to was like, well, he's got like the sort of he's got the sort of physical proportions of like marble, like Greek marble statues, right? Which
he's a marble bust guy.
But it's very much like like you can't. I don't think you can be a rat boy and also like a marble bust, like kind of perfectly proportioned.
Yeah. I think maybe
guy,
what
right?
they're
I feel like you have to choose one.
I think maybe what they're more referring to is like not so much the guy himself, because he got like fucking ripped for that wrestler movie, but more like the way that he is and plays in The Bear. Like because there he's super white and he's got like that sort of skinny thing going on. It's like it's not
just an average man. In an extremely expensive plain white shirt.
Well, this is also it. I think it's like, I don't know. I think about like all these trends, and obviously there's like an element of it which is just like, okay, we've just run out of stuff to write about, and so we now just have to like make up we have to like make up categories, and the categories get like weirder and weirder as they go. And I do wonder whether part of this is like a hangover of that. It's just like the sense of, in order to sort of generate more content and to sort of
BuzzFeed
generate more
lives on.
Right, and so we have to just like keep on creating categories, saying that this category is like, you know, a real thing that is also like the trend of the summer or whatever. And then like a few months down the line, you kind of, you know, it shows up on these feeds like, oh, remember when like White Boy Summer was a thing or whatever, and it's like, yeah, but that's only because you said it was White Boy Summer. It wasn't because it was like, I was excited for White Boy Summer and it never happened.
Thing is,
Hussein,
if it's Rat Boy Summer, we have to admit that like Pete Buttigieg was way ahead of the curve.
It's his moment. Yeah, that's true. It's his moment. Yeah.
See, I'm predicting a return of Jordan Peterson, because if anybody is like is Ratman Summer, then it's fucking that guy.
Lobster Boy Summer.
No, he falls into Rat King Summer, and that he's just tangled in amongst other men. That's how that works.
But Hussein, I'm gonna have to refute, you know, the fact that this is based on nothing and on just getting clickbait, because the article cited, you know, a noted expert in the field, quote, former U.S. President, former U.S. President,
rat expert Lee Evans.
Yeah, no, former U.S. President George Bush's daughter, Jenna Bush, who co-hosts the Today Show in America, naturally, explained it clearly. Quote, hot rodent boyfriends or sexy rat man are one and the same. So,
this is just a Tumblr post become fucking
a 10-year-old having really confused feelings about Master Splinter and Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles.
Who remembers Roland Rat?
So, if someone comes up to you and says, hello, sexy rat man, they are also calling you a rodent boyfriend, she declares.
I think it's so undignifying that, like, you can be sort of like a president's daughter or whatever, right? And, like, you still have to participate. You still have to participate in, like, the same bullshit discourse as, like, the rest of us.
Yeah.
Like, she is sort of subject to this. She is subject to the trend cycle in the same way that we all are. And she's probably like she gets paid a lot more for it, and obviously just like, I don't know, having like a war criminal as a dad is probably like difficult in like, you know, in lots of different ways. Nevertheless, like, it is quite funny to sort of see that, oh, you know, you are still subject to the same bullshit as we are. Yeah, I think that sort of says something about like the nature of celebrity. But I'm not sure what that would be. Just
at least her war criminal dad actually made it to president, so, you know, pour one out for Meghan McCain.
Yeah, there's a spectre haunting the American newsroom, the spectre of the crack.com listicle.
So true.
She further advised, you should want to date Stuart Little.
Okay, all right. Okay.
Anyway, that's
why won't the sexy rat man come out of the walls?
all right, Charlie Kelly.
Yeah, exactly. Now you're no longer like grossly paranoid. Your hot boyfriend really is scurrying through the walls, and you can hear him.
I'm just remembering in the fucking 90s when there was like a big outcry about some kid that were calling the rat boy who was hiding in the air vents like a wall.
Yeah, wondering where like your sexy rat boyfriend went, only to like, you know, and thinking that he's sort of having illicit affairs and stuff with other like women who like rats for some reason, but he comes back with just like a massive like bag of Costco cheese, and like bins of just shit. I don't know. I don't know what rats get up to these days.
Getting mad at him because he's traipsing bits of wall insulation through the house.
All those AI-generated images of like Paddington Bear and Stuart Little walking off into the sunset have a whole new meaning now. Anyway, that's your brief excursion into dating advice for this hot summer going up. Buy the T-shirt in our merch store. I wanted to, before we get to the main topic, I wanted to do the most important policy launch that we've seen this week, and of course it's from the Labour Party. We have to briefly do this. This is from the Express, because obviously that's where Yvette Cooper gives the real scoops to. Quote, yobs who race around terrified communities on off-road bikes would see their vehicles destroyed under Labour plans to crack down on antisocial behaviour. Police will be given the powers to crush dirt and quad bikes and hit offenders with tougher fines.
Each copper will be given individually the strength to crush your bike into a cube.
They're all going to get a huge pair of mechanical gloves that they can use to just pick the bike up and fold it.
They're gonna pair it with the Chrono Legionnaire backpack we were discussing the other day. They're gonna erase your bike from the timeline.
I would simply demand trial by combat, thus allowing me to get on my quad bike. But the problem is that I need to face off Keir Starmer in a 4x4.
I personally think we should just recruit more orcs with crusher claws and just police the local neighbourhood.
Couldn't be any worse, really, could it?
What happens if the yobs start to paint all their quad bikes red? What then?
They will be going even faster.
Labour actually made a campaign ad for this, which I watched, so you don't have to. Which shows an off-road bike essentially being put in a crusher with the hilarious meme of you wouldn't confiscate a social vehicle and then auction them back to the offenders.
Glitter bit. Jesus fucking Christ, man.
It's not the only Glenn bit they like, so...
Do they even have those on DVDs anymore?
Do they even have DVDs anymore?
Well, I mean, that does beg the question, but wow, we are doing shit from the 2000... Well, yeah, I mean, actually, it's all coming together now. Yeah. Fair play.
It feels like a bit weird in the sense that even if you sort of take the sentiment side, I used to live in South London and sort of in an area where I assume that they sort of refer to these types of areas of antisocial behavior and stuff. But most of the time, you're gonna get mugged by someone if they are talking about mugging. You're gonna get mugged by someone on a normal bicycle.
No, they're talking about noise.
Yeah, they're literally just talking.
So it's noise. They just want to reduce the noise. Okay, all right. So that's even dumber for some reason because it's just I don't know. Because did you see the video as well? The sort of ad they put out, and it begins with you wouldn't sort of steal a bike, and I was like, okay, let's see where this is going because it was you wouldn't sort of crush a bike or something. It didn't make any sense. It was clear what they were trying to parody, but none of it made any sense. But the weird video where it was destroyed in a dump. Or in sort of a refuge center, and the sort of it seemed very confusing because it was okay, you've got this message of you want to in a similar vein of you want to smash the gangs and stuff like that. It doesn't mean anything, and so you've got this kind of visual motif that you're trying to project, which is just you want to smash stuff, right? You just want to destroy things, but I don't know, I don't think a police officer. I'm not sure about the idea of police officers striking deals with refuge centers to be okay, we just want you to destroy all the stuff that we bring to you and don't ask any questions about it. I feel that could lead to kind of that could lead to some unintended things by the Labour Party, but I'm sure they thought about that as well.
Yeah, we need to be thankful that the Tories crashed the economy so hard that Labour can't spend any money. Otherwise, they'd be promising police the orbital strike from Helldivers to use against antisocial bikes or something like that.
Maybe if we're really lucky, they're just going to promise them all their own thresher, one for every force, but they need to operate it. That's going to be really good.
The thing is,
they'll invent their own sort of dirt bike or something, which is a quiet dirt bike.
See what I would do to just help budgets is give every police station its own Tiberium harvester, and then we'll be rolling in it very soon.
The thing is, it would probably be easier in the long run to just build a track somewhere in the community that people can race ride the bikes around, and then they don't have to ride around
Jamie,
the estate.
that sounds incredibly loud already. So that's
but
right
also,
out.
Yeah, That also sounds like you actually would like young people to have fun.
Yeah,
which is
it's true.
Very anti-labor.
Yeah,
Oh,
I think
going to a place for free? What do you think this is? Communist Russia?
I think I've mentioned
Every
before on the
weeknight,
podcast
a few people have to suffer not hearing a couple of the words on Coronation Street.
Yeah,
and that can't go on.
I think I've mentioned before that like we got a fucking skate park built just outside the village, like just up a hill. And then like within a couple of years we had people complaining about like the kids hanging out there. Do you know what I mean? And it's like that's what it built. We built it for. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
it's
we were
antisocial for
against
the
it
kids
then.
to skate at the skate park. People have to walk their dogs up there, you know. It's like, fuck off.
Yeah, but don't
One
worry,
of the
JB,
children looked at my dog. My dog was frightened.
Yeah, but pretty soon, like, the kids won't make it up the hill anymore anyway, because they're going to ban under 16s from purchasing energy drinks. That's also
Is that not
Labour
already
policy.
a thing?
It is.
I
but
think it's
it's
voluntary in a lot of shops.
voluntary, I think. Yeah.
So,
Oh, right, okay.
yeah.
This is specifically aimed, like, because apparently supermarkets technically have, like, a policy that, like, you should do an ID check if you buy, like, Monster Energy or some shit like that.
They do. It's really fucking annoying.
I've got ID'd a few. I've got
Have you
ID'd a
really?
few times. Yeah. Well, I
Wow.
mean, I don't really buy energy drinks unless I really need them, right? But I did. Yeah, I bought like a Monster a few months ago. And I got ID'd, and like the guy made me take out my I think he I'm very sure that this guy was just taking the piss, right? But he made me take out my ID, and he was like, I gave him my driving license, and he's like really looking at it. And I'm just like, dude, like I have a beard, and my like my shoulders are rolling forward, like I'm definitely in my 30s. Like I have the body of someone who spent their prime years at a desk. Like, give me a break, please. This fucking like teenager sort of looking at my ID and then looking at me and then it was insane. It was an absolutely insane and humiliating procedure. Probably the reason why I haven't bought an energy drink since that time.
The system works.
Yeah.
I've been carded for them, and I'm nearly 50. Do you know what I mean? I look absolutely fucking clapped, and like sometimes people in Tesco are like, "You got ID for that?" And I'm like, "Are you fucking high?" Do you know what I mean?
This is because you look like you've just clawed your way out of the earth, though. So
Yeah, they don't know what the age disparity is for mole men.
Yeah, well, if you were like a rat boy, then like you would know how to you'd know how to scurry your drops of Monster Energy.
Yeah, if you're a rat boy and you're one, well, you're all good to go.
Yeah, but apparently this is all. This measure is, at least according to the Labour Party, is to protect
What's a
your
pad
teeth.
manifesto inches?
That too, but it's to protect your teeth and also improve concentration in classrooms.
Oh yeah, do you know what might help attention in classrooms? Actually having a fucking health service that will diagnose people with ADHD.
Yeah,
I'm sure taking the caffeine away from those kids will be fucking great.
Imagine that.
Although Keir Starmer, when talking to the Mirror, also said, quote, "Young people are feeling the impact of 14 years of conservative chaos and decline, as they are no longer chasing their dreams but a dentist appointment."
Oh, fucking... Every single piece of this is just laser focused at me.
I'm gonna.
I
Let the
fucking
punishment
hate
fit
this.
the crime.
Jesus.
It's really interesting that like in the sense that you sort of know why this policy has been and there's a very sort of similar argument to like vapes and stuff, right? And it's not to sort of say because like I'm not sort of the position of I think energy drinks are actually like are good actually, and like children should be able to drink more of it. Like I do think like this does there's sort of proliferation of them in the same way that like the proliferation of like the single use vape is not a particularly good thing, but I think is a lot more indicative of the kind of like it's more of like a product of a society that we've built, right?
Yeah.
And I don't know, like when I was in school, like my friends and I used to, we used to have those Happy Shopper energy drinks, those 35p ones.
Oh, they were
I don't know whether
amazing.
you guys and they tasted great, and like, but I think a lot of us sort of had them because, well, number one, it was cheap, but also like going to the school is like quite long and taxing, right? And I don't know, like, you know, and I think as you sort of allude to, as like budgets have been cut and everything, like, you know, the amount of sort of and also where like schools are under a lot more pressure, like, you know, the actual way of teaching and education is a lot more intense. And so I think there is this degree of like, well, you know, these kids aren't just drinking them because like they taste particularly good, right? I think it's also a product of being in kind of like quite high pressured environments and having like, or needing these pick-me-ups because like there isn't really anything else. And as you mentioned, like, you know, health service, but also like adequate mental health care, adequate like being able to be outside, and like, you know, school is a social experience and everything. Like, I think these are all sort of indicative of much broader issues of, you know, detachment and isolation, and just like these high pressure environments where students, I would argue, are like under a lot more pressure. You know, as Keir Starmer sort of said, like, you know, they're not chasing their dreams anymore, they're chasing dental appointments. And the kind of thing is that like, well, they're not getting dental appointments because of how fucked like the dental service has been for like God knows how long, but they're not, you know, chasing your dreams becomes a lot harder, because even if you get to that point of being able to, like, quite often you are priced out. And so there is this thing about like needing to perform to like, you know, as high a capacity as you can, just to sort of have a chance at like doing what you want to do.
Right,
yeah,
but
I don't know. Have... It's sort of, it does sort of feel like it's all related in a way that the Labour Party and I guess like political media class like don't want to see.
Yeah, I mean, but the way that they think it's related is that all these kids need to stop brushing their teeth with Rockstar. That's the problem, apparently. Like,
yeah, I mean,
stop. Is there anything in this, Rob, about them like not advertising it?
Oh, no,
any rules about that?
God, no.
Yeah, of course there isn't. No, nothing actually effective here. Just like the shop's not allowed to sell it to you, which stops them all the time, definitely.
Well, the fine in the shop's going to go up to £2,500, so, you know, there is that.
I mean, there's also like the fact that when you are, I mean, I feel like we've talked about this on like the last 2 or 3 episodes, but like the fact that if you are a teenager, there is nothing for you to fucking do anymore. It is be on your phone, which, you know, there are
also
rumblings.
Which is a crime against God.
Yeah, which is something they're also trying. They're trying to ban.
Yeah, they are banning
16s or 18s from social media, which is fucking insane.
From having
by the
phones,
way.
I think was it.
So, like you as a teenager, I've definitely said this before. You as a teenager are expected to go to school, perform your scholarly functions, go home, return to your storage cubicle, and then emerge again the next day, unless it's a weekend, in which case you have to stay in there because there's fucking nothing you can do. So yeah, of course kids are going to turn to fucking vapes, Monster Energy drink, doing TikToks and learning about communism and shit like that, because there's nothing else for them to fucking do.
Yeah. But also, if they ban children from owning phones, who is Piers Morgan going to hack?
Getting really irritated because he can't find the moo button to access the voicemail.
Anyway, I think that'll do us for the brief bits. Hi, this is Rob. I'm disturbing your delightful in-ear entertainment to tell you that we have a Patreon at patreon.com/praxiscast. You can go there for more episodes, our Discord, bonus clips, and much, much more. This is also me begging you for your money in exchange for goods and services. Thank you. Oh, very well then. Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby. Get ourselves some snacks. Bye. So I want to move on to the main topic, because one of the reasons that Hussein is here, apart from the delight of his company, is it hit just before the election announcement, so it got kind of snowed under amidst all that. But we finally got sight of the long-awaited report by John Woodcock, aka Lord Walney.
Finally get investigated.
No. So
perhaps we'll just tow around that one here.
Yeah. Since he left the Labour Party, shall we say, under circumstances,
what were those circumstances again, Rob? Enlighten me.
They're online. Go look them up.
Just Google, why did Lord Walney leave the Labour Party? For normal reasons.
So since then, he's of course become a member of the House of Lords, thanks to Boris Johnson, and he is now, I can't remember what his exact title is, something like the Counter-Terrorism and Protecting Democracy Advisor or something
isn't
like
it?
that.
Something like that.
That's the one, Anti-Extremism Czar. And he's been training this for a long time, but now it's out. He wrote a long fucking report. It's 300 pages long. I read it. Called Protecting Our
The
Democracy
Death Note
from
Against
Coercion.
Palestine Action. What? Oh, no. Something else.
Well, Palestine Action does get a numerous amount of pages dedicated to it, yes. Basically,
Are there any points in this where he fucked up and forgot to change Just Stop Oil to Palestine Action to make it like a contemporary document?
No, I think this has been edited. I'm not going to say for clarity, but at least for sort of reading of obviousness.
Or fucking brevity, Christ.
So the basic point of this thing, which is of course a vital question, certainly in the age of pro-Palestine protests and Just Stop Oil protests, is how do we balance our precious property rights and maybe also democracy with the right to protest? How do we make sure?
And we do that by coming down firmly in favour of the former two.
Well, you say that. He just has a number of sensible solutions for all this, but we'll get there.
He takes 300 pages to get down to it, but that's the size of it. Come on.
Well, I mean, the first size of it is in terms of length and stuff. Like I said, it's 300 pages long. The page is dedicated to explaining and sort of determining far-right terrorism and far-right protests. There's 22 pages dedicated to that. The number of pages dedicated to left-wing extremism and protests, which, by the way, include Black Lives Matter and Palestinian solidarity protests, is 55.
Black Lives are mattering. It's an extreme political point of view. Yeah,
it is actually,
folks.
Yeah, he lumps it in with, what is it? He has an acronym for it. It's basically left-wing extremism, anarchism, and single-issue protests, under which fall anything related to climate change, anything related to BLM, Palestinian solidarity marches.
So what do the far-right terrorism categories fall under if single-issue... I'm Is every far-right terrorist organisation just a comprehensive ideology? And Lord Walney is extremely observant of that fact and gives them due diligence.
Yeah. You've got all those books written about far-right ideology, but no one's ever actually sat down and codified that in any sort of pamphlet or manifesto or anything for the left. So it's impossible to say what it truly is.
No, he does mention that he says that anti-Semitism specifically is far right, as is something else, and I can't remember what it is at the moment. Actually, here let me give you sort of an overview, and also how he wants to sort of put several things in a same category. So he's talking about why people protest. Quote, causes that parts of the public are concerned about, such as the environment, anti-racism, anti-war, transgender rights, the level of immigration, Brexit, defending public monuments, and the measures around COVID lockdowns.
So does he consider all of those single issues? I presumably, given the category, yes.
No, the monuments and I think anti-vax and pure anti-Semitism, sort of old school anti-Semitism, those will be far right, but environment, anti-racism, anti-war, transgender rights, those are certainly fall under the sort of broader banner of left-wing protest.
Is he invented a second wave anti-Semitism that applies to the left only here?
I'm not saying.
Fuck off, Rob.
So basically, all these protests, some of which are legitimate and must be balanced with freedom of speech and blah blah blah, but they do all cause disruption, and disruption must end. How do we define disruption? Well, according to the Public Order Act of last year, which is a fine piece of legislation, if you or an organization that you work for basically are, quote, hindered to more than a minor degree from making a journey, doing construction and or maintenance, and or are prevented from making or receiving a time-sensitive product and or prevented or hindered from accessing essential goods and services, that means you are disrupted, and that means the police should have the power to, move you on. So I'm not quite sure if I could deliver.
That sounds incredibly precise.
Yeah. And that's not a problem. It's actually, he thinks these powers should be expanded.
Wouldn't this also imply that, like, if like TFL are sort of doing emergency repair works or something, that they would also like fall under the auspices of this document? Like, the police should be able to arrest TFL or railway workers because they're preventing you from like getting your treats or whatever.
Only if they're members of the RMT.
Oh yeah, that's true. Actually.
Or ASLEF.
Well, like, I genuinely don't know if you were getting your lunch delivered in like Canary Wharf by a Deliveroo guy, that would count as like a significant disruption. Like, I'm not.
Keir Starmer straight to jail.
Yeah, so like I said, many words and pages are dedicated to showing just how like anti-Semitic and terrorist in intent all the Gaza protests are, and there's strong hints at various legal means that any upcoming government could and should adopt to curb more of these protests. And that's apparently because the far left and Islamic groups are working together on, quote, anti-Israel activity. There are 1,300 plus sources in this document, by the way, of some varying
how many
quality.
of these are tweets?
A number. Also,
how many of them have been cited at one point by Anders Breivik as good things, actually?
Well, a lot of them do cite
How many
the
of
Daily
them?
Mail.
How many of them are Paul Mason's like fucking spider diagram?
And like, I mean, because so much of it, genuinely, like a lot of it is like pieces in the Daily Mail and in the Express and stuff. Like, so much of it of this whole report is just like almost word for word stuff you've heard a million times when we play Comment or Commentariat. Free speech is important, but only for TERFs. Marxists are hidden behind Black Lives Matter. Our precious parliamentary institutions must be defended from the people it pretends to represent.
Lest their fluids become corrupted. Yeah.
Lest they disrupt the golden path to the Kwisatz Haderach. Yes, of course. And also, basically, why does that annoying Euroman Steve Bray have the right to yell outside Parliament when, important business is to be going
now,
on?
if by dint of this report that guy gets the megaphone slapped out of his hand, like, look, you don't got to hand it to him, but...
But I think the main point of this report, like after having read all of this and thought about it a bit, the main point of this is this thing is not designed to be read by normal people. But in this sense, I think it's really a lot like the Cass report. It's there to provide a reference point for future governments.
300-page fig leaf.
Yes, and it's there to, for any incoming government, say an authoritarian Labour government, to say, look, we are doing this because we have this 300-page report that you're obviously not going to read. But, it's written by the anti-extremism czar,
it's
and then they'll take it from there.
It's written by the anti-extremism czar, and it says that all these organisations, left-wing and right-wing, see balance, this is centrism, these organisations must be cracked down upon, and crack down we shall. All the bikes should be destroyed. All children should be confined to their cubes.
It's not very impartial to get a czar to write things about the left-wing, is it?
I don't want to take this opportunity to bring up how much it fucks me off that they keep calling things czars.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's something in the House of Commons of special purpose, but I'm trying to work it out. Maybe see if you can get there.
You're the anti-extremism czar. Well,
anyway, so I'm going to go through the report and touch on some bits that, and basically, just starting with the foreword, because the foreword's also always an interesting place. The literal opening is, "We are at a crossroads in our democracy," which is just
Is that not the fucking base function of a democracy, to constantly be at a crossroads because you're having... Oh, fuck off.
Every
Shut
4
the
to
fuck
5
up.
years. Every 4 to 5 years, we have to decide what politics is again. This will not do.
I mean, but the specific crossroads that he's referring to is basically the noble right to protest that everybody has, which is good, but has now been hijacked by extremists and hostile states who wish to sow division in our precious democracy, where you can vote between several different options.
Is it the Russians again?
Amongst others, yes, and the Chinese.
Of course.
Well, if it's just those two, Iran, pull your finger out.
It would be a turn up for the years if Putin ended up being climate Stalin, though.
Basically, like, again, yes, you do have the right to protest, but, quote, chaos cannot be condoned, intimidation cannot be tolerated, and brute force must not be allowed to win the argument.
Yeah, protests cannot be effective, otherwise, God, we might actually have to do something about them. So, best kneecap them now.
Yeah. Well, look, all protests should be like those sort of the anti-Brexit protests.
No,
the ones
no.
where, like, they had all the placards.
Take it back.
Like
Take it back.
Like if the Palestine protests were more like the wooferendum, we wouldn't be like having this existential crisis about our democracy right now.
Me holding my dog, going, "You tell him he can't have dates anymore."
Jesus Christ.
Oh, Jesus fucking Christ, Rob.
So, if you're wondering what is unacceptable, blocking roads or slow walking is a use of unacceptable force. So
Slow walking. Oh my
force.
God.
yeah,
I'm going to arrest all the pensioners on my high street that take up the space. I'm going to be calling John Woodcock directly and telling him to arrest them.
I think it's good actually that the police that TfL and the police are going to work together to arrest every single dickhead who stands on the wrong side of the escalators on the tube. Look, tourists are just going to have to learn one way or another.
I've got good news for you about the next probable Prime Minister and his opinions on tourists in London. Fucking
another thing that's no more to be allowed is to cause a ruckus in a council meeting, because that is a place of dignified. Yeah. You're not allowed to. Basically, you're not allowed. You know how sometimes people like yell at their councillors because they've sold off all the council housing to some prick developer that that I'm not going to say buys them off, but may have a financial stake in certain councillors. You're no longer allowed to do that, because then you're interfering with the proper functioning of a proper democracy.
Am I now?
Yeah. I mean, like, I almost feel stupid to say it, like the fact that protesting has been a fundamental underpinning of democracy for what, 250 years? 300
I'd say
years?
3,000 if you want to count Athens.
Well,
but
yeah,
sure.
I mean, modern democracy. Then, if you want to really be pedantic, I mean, for fuck's sake, the suffragettes fucking bombed people. For fuck's sake.
Yeah, and that was
there was no one travelling on that horse though, so technically that would be fine under this.
So
no
and the last
one's
thing
late for work, so it's
that
fine.
is definitely also no longer to be allowed is to intimidate politicians, by which, yes, they mean at them. They mean do not fucking tweet at Jess Flips ever again.
Oh, I wonder how many times John Woodcock brings up Diane Abbott in this report.
I can tell you the answer to that one now. I think it's once.
Once?
Wow.
Yeah.
The
Most
most singularly...
to be fair.
Sorry, Hussein?
I was going to say, that's a lot more than I expected.
Yeah. Oh, yeah,
so
yeah,
not
granted.
to be referenced at all. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Presumably Diana Abbott atted someone else and that was a problem. Maybe
she
it's
got
going to be illegal
caught in a
to it's going to be illegal to post a fucking crusty JPEG of someone.
So like I said, you are allowed to protest, but only in the liberal tradition, and only if you never, ever, ever, ever interfere with the rights of ordinary citizens, because as a protester are no longer an ordinary citizen.
This is an Arrested Development bit, the free speech zone. right?
Yes,
Yeah.
that's pretty much what
Getting
what
together
you-
with all of my like-minded pals and chanting "better things aren't possible," but with a sad and frowny face.
I mean,
And
the
a
free
quickened
speech
pace
zones-
so that you're not arrested.
the free speech zones weren't an Arrested Development bit; they were an actual thing George Bush did.
Oh my
Yeah,
god!
they were.
Yeah.
Yeah. During the conventions, they made like a sort of metal barrier thing during the Republican conventions, so people could protest in the free speech zone. You're right, Jay. Jesus Christ. So yeah, and also like he does say, look, yes, the far right might be like much more likely to deploy violence as an actual, means of getting their point across. However,
Boy, these lefties sound scary, don't they?
yeah, actually, you're right. They are much more scary than the far right, but that's because
the far right don't deploy violence in traffic.
Wow. Well, one might almost say that the political goals of the far right are much more in alignment with that of John Woodcock than the so-called far left.
No, it's because the far left's agenda, like sinister agenda, is much more likely to undermine faith in our parliamentary democracy and the rule of law.
And why might that be?
Yeah. Oh no.
Yeah, I wonder what beef we could have with that.
Yeah, I mean, I could briefly introduce John Woodcock, but for the interest of time, I'm just going to be like very, very quick. He was only an MP for like 5 years or 9 or something. He wasn't in there very long. But the second he came into office, he became chair of the Labour Friends of Israel and chair of Progress.
Oh, a long line of just complete and utter psychopaths. That.
Yeah, he's a man specifically who loves bombs. Like, he fucking loves the arms industry, and supporting the Saudis as well.
Wasn't he like the MP for somewhere where there was like a giant fucking arms
Yeah,
manufacturer?
Barrow and
or something?
Furness. It's where one of the main BAE plants is. Yeah.
Yeah.
To be fair, like after he quit being an MP and did this counterterrorism czar thing, he did also front the Purpose Defence Coalition, which is or was a lobbying corporation for the arms industry, which is working to evaluate the positive impact UK defence companies are making in their communities and beyond.
Yeah, but not too far beyond, I imagine.
Yeah.
The main sponsor of that is or was the Italian arms corporation Leonardo, which was granted UK export licenses for arms to Israel 26 times in the last 15 odd years. That's according to a piece on Woodcock in Navarra. There's also BP, the mining giant Glencore, and a big oil and gas company. And weirdly, since like this report came out and some people asked him, hey, what the fuck is this Purpose Defence Coalition? The website's gone completely blank, and it just claims that this was a one-off event in support of Ukraine. So it doesn't exist anymore, except if you go to archive.
Oh well, that's all right then.
Yeah, I mean, during his
No
time as
questions for John Woodcock to answer on this one.
I mean, he was also several times. There were certain allegations were made that you can Google on your very own, and also like his CLP tried to like boot him out several times unsuccessfully, unfortunately, and obviously he's a huge anti-Corbyn guy that should count as no surprise. And basically, the last thing that he's been known for, that he's been on the telly for, is railing against pro-Palestine demonstrations, and now doing this report. As a side note, by the way, just because I couldn't leave it out, he's married to Isabel Hardman, who is the assistant editor of The Spectator, who, in her turn, weirdly enough, is the daughter of the first chairman of CAMRA, the Campaign for Real Ale.
Oh, God. Okay, yeah.
Members of many sinister organisations, we got it.
So yeah, he gives a brief overview as to like how this report was put together. Basically, he has spent a lot of time talking to the UK intelligence community, the Met, and government ministers, all of whom weirdly seem to agree on that the far left is getting out of hand. As well as, like I said, there's a huge amount of like citation from the Daily Mail,
Rob,
the Telegraph, various right-wing think tanks like the Policy Exchange, and like
Rob,
literally. Yeah.
Can you just quickly remind me what the political ideologies of the two people who recently in the last 10 years have murdered MPs? Were they by any chance raging Marxists.
Well, I don't think it's that important to go into. I mean, they might have been far right, yes, but they weren't trying to subvert democracy. That's
right. Killing an MP in the right wing is not a subversion of democracy. I'm going to write that one down.
Another thing that I just remembered, so because you said about like you referenced like the Isabel Hardman thing as like sort of a benign point, but I just remembered that like because it's on my bookshelf actually, that she wrote a book called Why We Get the Wrong Politicians.
Yeah,
and I don't know whether you guys read it. I sort of skimmed it when it came out.
Oh, God.
When it came out like years ago. And I think it's just like sort of interesting to look at this because obviously the episode, we're sort of talking about like the kind of relationship between like how democracy is sort of understood and like how, what the threats that like John Woodcock et al. Like try to kind of perceive it to be, or like at least are trying to advocate for it to be versus like what it actually is. And I sort of remember that in Isabel's book, like it kind of touches around the issue of, because most of the book is really kind of amounts to MPs aren't paid enough. And and so they have to get jobs elsewhere.
Aaron Bastani, is that you?
And that's why the idea of like the MP as like the public servant is no longer kind of like in the sort of it's no longer like sort of prevalent in the popular imagination, and that if we just paid MPs more and we sort of like gave them sort of more sort of authority and like certain area, and I can't remember what she sort of cites, then we can actually like hold them more accountable, which I think is like an interesting way to explore. And it's not to sort of say that like hers and her husband's like views are the same. I can't really sort of say that, but it is an interesting way to kind of look at how they perceive what the sort of role and position of an MP is. And like I think the argument more that like because they don't get paid enough, like they have to seek kind of work elsewhere, or they have to sort of, external interests are sort of built into the nature of being an MP. I think that's sort of an interesting, like it's a way, it's like sort of a moral, it's trying to like a moral varnish, I guess, over like what is effectively like quite a weak argument. Again, like this is like I skimmed it a very long time ago, so like she may actually like advocate a much more serious argument, but I've completely forgotten that was my recollection of it.
Having read some of Isabel Hartman's work, I very much doubt that there was a more serious point to be made than that. I'm surprised that she made one that coherent. There's a whole bunch of stuff, like I said, he cites a whole bunch of right-wing newspapers, basically, and he cites a whole bunch of these think tanks. Some of them are just like genuine fronts for like Israel, like Israeli military people and Israeli intelligence people. But just to pick out one, just to give you a flavor of it, he did an online workshop on conspiracy theories hosted by the Counter Extremism Project. And I was like, who the fuck are those people? Well, the CEO, as it turns out, was the deputy campaign manager for George W. Bush when he ran his second term. And the current president is the current corporate secretary and the vice president for lobbying for Activision Blizzard.
Oh my God.
Okay.
And among its advisory board members is Elliot Abrams, who is pretty much like a war criminal. Like,
yeah, man. And extremism is trying to resist literally any of the numerous government overthrows that the US has backed. Yeah.
I do like that they've got a gamer in there.
Rise up.
This is what it all boils down to, though, doesn't it? Like, this whole thing is about how it's not nice to be violent. You can't be violent, especially against people who are democratically elected, while completely ignoring the fact that the entire existence of the democracy is based on the threat of state violence.
Yeah, but that's unidirectional, David. Like,
that's what I mean. But he won't even acknowledge that that's a thing. He won't even acknowledge that maybe there's a reason that these people might be violent. Maybe there's a reason they're not going to like work within the bounds of that the liberal democracy is laid out for them, and it's precisely because like the violence is what obviously gets things done. So
the problem with violence is it turns out it's actually quite effective at stuff. Don't mind me just herding a bunch of people into this basement. The pillows are for their comfort.
And also, and then we'll stop talking about it, but Hussein, I found, a special one for you. The Counter-Extremism Project also currently employs Liam Duffy, who is the previous head of the Prevent strategy.
Well, yeah, that's not surprising. Cool, great, wonderful. Yeah. I mean, there's like a lot to say, but I don't know whether this is like the right time to sort of say it. But
yeah, go for it.
Like when I was sort of skimming through the report, and the thing that's obviously sort of like the interesting underpinning of this is like the question of like, well, what happened to Prevent, right? And like, or like Prevent sort of still exists, but it kind of doesn't at the same time. And so what is the relationship between like this and kind of the sort of program that's already in place, and one that was like massively expanded? Because I think, I don't know, like to sort of like think about Prevent, and I when I was like working as a journalist, I sort of spent a lot of my time kind of trying to like figure out how this thing worked. And as everyone else who sort of has done work on this will sort of say, like, your success is very limited, partly because of like how secret like a lot of the operations are, but also like how incoherent and inconsistent it is. But in 2010, when like Prevent sort of expands under David Cameron, like it sort of goes from this sort of community-driven program, which is very much focused on like violent extremism and the idea that like, we want to prevent people from carrying out like acts of violence. And that isn't, obviously it's sort of mostly targeted at Muslims, even though it's sort of not said directly, but it kind of encompasses other like, back then it was still like, they were still sort of encompassing like left-wing activist groups and stuff, like environmental groups, PETA, I think, or like so PETA like linked organizations were sort of part of it from what I remember. But in 2010, the whole like sort of Cameronite strategy is like, we're looking at like non-violent extremism, right? And like, if you look at like how Prevent expanded in the 2010s, and again, it was like still very much targeted at Muslims, which is sort of why it got like very limited attention from like everything else, and is sort of perhaps like less prevalent than it is now. But it was this idea that like, violent intent is not just enough. Like extremism and its relationship to like the nebulous idea of British values means that like, people who fall under the auspices of extremism can be people who like, have they don't like support quote unquote like LGBTQ rights, which is an interesting to think of now when we think of like, oh no, there is a group that is very much opposed to LGBTQ rights, and they happen not to be led by a Muslim, but by a very nice they all write for, but they also like their leader like resides in a castle in Scotland. That's something that perhaps like should be addressed in this. Like if you're looking at like first principles of Prevent, but like oddly enough, it doesn't seem to apply to them. It can sort of involve there were lots of sort of references to like, someone might be referred to Prevent or like Channel or whatever if like they are against like, the idea of democracy, which like, again, is a very interesting statement to make considering, the idea, are we sort of talking about democracy as like an intellectual exercise? Like, are we looking at democracy, is it just people who don't like voting? And in which case, like, okay, do you sort of, if you choose not to vote, then are you kind of like an extreme? Do you know what I mean? It's like it kind of just becomes more confusing, and every time you ask like people, because I knew like people who like sources and stuff who like worked on Prevent strategies and everything, and what I found interesting was that like the people who were sort of subject to do it, which were like most public servants, like mostly teachers, are just like, I don't really know how to do any of this, right? Like, I don't know how to sort of implement any of this, and you're not given any guidance to do it. And so all you're doing is sort of referring students, and like, not a lot really comes out of it. But like the worst case situations are like, young people who are like told they're in trouble, but in trouble over things that don't really make sense. And
Isn't
obviously
like
that's just going to breed like a bunch
drawing pictures of stuff that is like, a child has drawn it and has been confused. As a result. Yeah,
and like whenever these stories would come out, like, the quote that would be given is like, oh yeah, like the teacher like probably shouldn't have referred to this child to Prevent, and like, it was a mistake or whatever. But again, it's like, yeah, but you need to explain like what and how this program works, right? Like, and the problem was that because it was so ill-defined and because it was so misunderstood, because there was no sort of there was no sort of framework to understand this. So it was just like lots of groups, right? Lots of groups who made like, a lot of money. I guess like I can talk about this now because like they don't exist as an organization, but like Quilliam, for example, like are such a like big, kind of are so sort of central to, understanding how conservative party policy in the 2010s worked, because they were the ones who basically designed the counter-extremism program. None of them were held accountable for it. None of them were like told to sort of explain how this thing worked. And again, what's very funny about it is that the person who was at the forefront of that, Juan Majid Nawaz, you know, I would just say look at his Substack, because I don't think that this is a mentally healthy man. And he is one who, like, by the nature of like his own sort of predilections to extreme, like it's sort of like conspiracy theories and stuff, would probably be like someone referred to by this program now.
Didn't he like rebrand as a Q guy at some point? Nawaz?
I don't know. I mean, like, he sort of like
anti-vaxxer or something. He very much got into that world after.
He kind of went off the rails during COVID, but I think it was also at this time when like he was kind of maligned from Quilliam because he was giving too much bad, like because they were giving him too much bad press. And then like when the whole thing imploded, it was just like, well, like what does he do? Like what's his use now? And then he had his LBC show, but then the LBC show got like cancelled for whatever, because he was like becoming a like COVID truther.
I'm trying to remember.
Really off the rails.
I'm just dragging shit up from my memory, but wasn't Majid Nawaz also the guy who was doing that thing with Tommy Robinson, where he said, actually, I'm, you know, a repentant fascist, and I'm actually now going to give like lectures about what it's like to leave the far right, when he was trying to pretend that for 6 months?
And there was this big thing where it was just like, oh, you know, Quilliam were like de-radicalizing Tommy Robbins, which again is like a very funny thing to think of right now, but also just indicative of like, okay, well, this strategy just does not work, right? And like when I was sort of looking through this report, what I'm sort of seeing is like the sort of underpinning logics of Prevent are still there. And when I'm thinking about like those underpinning logics, what I think is like, you know, it is sort of fueled by a great deal of paranoia and like suspicion. Obviously there's like a great deal of surveillance that is sort of necessary for this, like Prevent, like the cornerstone of Prevent is sort of surveillance and getting people to like watch each other and report each other and stuff, right? Like, you know, I did a course in a college like recently, and on the walls of this college, like in the classroom that we were in, like are these sort of very sort of obvious Prevent posters, things like, oh, you know, if you see like your classmate looking at like content that you think is suspicious, then like, you know, report that to your teacher, because they have like a duty to like, you know, act on it, right? Like all these things which are just like, okay, well, you know, to act in, to sort of to participate in public society means that like, you know, your trade-off to that is like, well, you also have to become a police officer, right? Yeah. And you have to like spy on your classmates and everything.
Well,
and, like,
I'm really glad we have this liberal democracy that we would never get like, you know, a surveillance state like the Stasi. That would be awful.
What I do find funny what I do find funny though is the fact that like the army, for example, knows what fascists look like. Like they put out that that guide a few years ago to like help spot people who are being radicalized. Like this is something that is known, and you know, Prevent ostensibly should be covering this shit, and the fact that it doesn't, it didn't,
It's also not to say that they don't, because again, like, you know, the people, like, there are people who like sort of have to do this stuff, and they, you know, again, like I know of people who like are kind of seeing is, I think I was speaking to, I did this story for the New Humanist like a while ago, and it involved like talking to teachers who were sort of trying to figure out like how to deal with their students who are like repeating Andrew Tate stuff, right? Which also falls under the Prevent thing. And what they were saying was like, well, when we were reporting, when we like sort of said, but yeah, our students are listening to Andrew Tate stuff on their phones, and like I'm not really sure what to do about it. Like, you know, their superiors, be it like, you know, head teachers or like, you know, the sort of Prevent liaison or whatever, also kind of shrugs their shoulders, because they're like, well, what do we, you know, because like the system is not built for those types of things either, right? By, you know, both because of how archaic it is, but also because its priorities are kind of, you know, like inherently political.
It's very obvious so, like, what its preferred category of extremism is.
And also just like its intervention mechanisms are sort of built for like certain kinds of people, but are sort of not built for others. And so, you know, it's not to sort of give credit to like the programmer, it's more just like, this is a very expansive and confusing program. And so people who sort of want to do this sincerely, you know, on the basis of like, well, we're trying to sort of prevent all our students from kind of exhibiting a kind of radical politics of any kind, or like a radical identity of any kind, like they can't really do anything beyond the sort of very specific remits that like the program has really, and even then like it's remits, as you mentioned, with like, you know, the children's drawings of like cucumbers and cooker bombs and so on, like,
that's the one,
you know, that doesn't really work out. And so imagine then it's like, okay, well, you know, my sort of like, you know, my Zoomer students are getting like blackpilled by, you know, Twitch streamers. Like imagine a teacher having to try figure all that out, and also a program that doesn't account for any of that, right? Like the thing about it is that, you know, and the thing about like the people who are sort of running it, beyond the fact that they have like a very, very clear agenda, is that even if you were sort of saying that, oh, you know, even if you were kind of taking them by their word that, oh, they're being sincere about wanting to sort of reduce extremism because they know that, like, you know, it can be like a real physical threat to like democracy or whatever, even if you wanted to sort of take them by their word, like they're not addressing any of the contemporary circumstances that like pose the actual threats at the moment, right? And you know, and we all know that this is kind of like, you know, I don't have to convince you guys of that, but that's what makes it really frustrating, because it's a sense of like, we know, like in this massive report, like, and as you mentioned, like, you know, this is not designed to be read by normal people. It's not even really designed to be read by, like, you know, people who are actually interested in what radicalization looked like. It is designed to be read by an incoming government who have no interest in, like, actually investing any money or resources into, like, expanding a expanding a sort of counter-extremism program. Whatever you think about, like,
or even
whether
like
it has a place or anything.
Yeah, or even like at a more base level to like do something about the causes that turns people to, you know, either the far left or the quote unquote far right, because the definition.
Well, this also reminds me of another. This also reminds me of another thing. Like when I was covering it, and like, you know, you'd speak to people who were, you know, subject to like prevent kind of interventions or whatever, and what they would sort of say is that, like, well, the reason why, like, you know, I believe in so and so, or like the reason, you know, is because of, like, you know, Western foreign policy and the fact that I can sort of see how, like, the effects of it. And when this was sort of said to people who were like working in counter-extremism or counter-terrorism and stuff, they would just dismiss it outright. They would just be like, oh no, actually that's not true, right? That's just an excuse that they're using.
That's
like,
not the right
these young
answer.
People, basically, it's not the right answer. And so, like, you would sort of say, like, no, like, I've spoken to like, you know, 50 people independently, and this is what they sort of say about, like, why they kind of adapt to radical politics. And what they would say would be like, oh no, you know, extremists use this excuse to, like, whitewash their opinions, but actually what we know is that it's religious zealotry. But what's interesting is, like, okay, well, if you've so clearly like kind of figured out your solution to this problem in one instance, but like, why does that sort of not apply to, like, you know, far right extremism, which is like so deeply ideological, and they don't make any sort of claims to say that it's not. And yet when you bring these problems to them, or when you bring these types of examples to them, like, you know, they'll just sort of shrug their shoulders and just be like, well, there's not really enough evidence to sort of suggest what kind of intervention we should do in this instance, and so we're just not going to address it all. Like, and that's why, like, and, you know, and beyond that, you also have people who are like very invested in like counter extremism, really targeting certain kinds of people, and not others. And so, like, when I was sort of doing some reading for this episode, like, one of the people in this is like a guy called Paul Stott, who I think is like a Henry Jackson guy.
Oh, good. That's a
like,
normal group of people.
Yeah. And he just like outrightly dismisses. He's like, "Oh yeah, the far right is actually a really minimal threat." Like when you look at the numbers, and like when you see the citation, it's just like the Henry Jackson Society. It's like, great, we're doing Mark Jacobs by Mark Jacobs type of situation, right?
In this report, they very much do that same thing where they say, yes, the far right is a problem, and yes, they are more like obviously violent because they have genuinely committed more violent acts, but they sort of say actually they're not as dangerous to democracy because, like, the organized far right, like the EDL or Britain First or National Action, have like either declined in force and power or don't really exist as a going concern anymore. So they're still dangerous. Yes, they're also dangerous because they're like more likely to inspire like people to act on their own, like sort of lone wolf things. But they're not as dangerous to like democracy because they're not formally organized, whereas the far left, as like, you know, BLM or Palestine marches, are organized and therefore present the greater threat.
I mean, it's obvious that like they like completely disregard Nigel Farage and whatever outfit he's currently captaining as a far right outfit, because they are, you know, ultimately comfortable
normal.
with that taking the reins of power and doing whatever the fuck they want, because the version of democracy that they view as being important, which is essentially the managed democracy that, you know, we live in. Like, look at the fucking polls. that is acceptable. And Nigel Farage being invited onto every other episode of Question Time is actually appropriate, and any suggestions that his views could be deemed extremist is just completely outrageous. And here he is on fucking the Daily Politics or whatever to talk about how actually he's just a normal bloke who goes down the pub just like you.
Well, actually, that interesting that you like. Now we're talking about this. So the report makes like a difference, or makes a very like clear statement when they're in their section talking about right-wing terrorism. They say actually right-wing terrorism has been like formally rebranded in like for all the intelligence services as extreme right-wing terrorism, and that's because if you just say right-wing terrorism, it's deemed to be offensive to all the normal people who just have right-wing views.
I mean, also, like, this is not a point that I'm sure, like, you guys have talked about this before, but it's all, you know, when you sort of think about what the sort of Conservative Party and what the right are kind of like, you know, as they sort of face electoral defeat, where they're sort of heading, like the idea of kind of saying, you know, you know, what they're sort of seeing in like Farage and Reform, but also just like a lot of these kind of like online kind of right movements is sort of where they're heading towards anyway, right?
Yeah.
The failure of like, you know, like technocratic conservatism sort of means that what's left is a kind of, you know, cultural conservatism, and that is one which is going to be one that is like entirely tied to like, you know, conspiracy, like conspiratorial thinking, and and also like I think clearly
and,
but also like, and clearly like also committed to violence, right? And my assumption is that like, especially in a sort of technocratic Keir Starmer government, where, you know, they can be rest assured that like, you know, the party will kind of malign the left as much as possible. Like they've almost been given a free run, like, you know, to speed run through to a very kind of extreme form of right wing conservatism, which, as we've sort of seen in Europe right now, will be very, very lucrative when like the technocratic style of governance does not work. Right. And so it feels insane to kind of be like, well, you know, you can sort of see what's about to happen from like miles off. But like the choices that, again, like the sort of commitment to sort of crushing any kind of left wing force, for like purely ideological reasons, kind of means that like, you know, they can't, I don't know. I guess I keep coming back to this idea that if they sort of acknowledge that right-wing forces are probably like the actual sort of threat to democracy, and that there's evidence to that, right? Then it sort of undermines this argument that like it's the far left that do it, and it, you know, and for like, you know, the Labour Party in the UK, like the whole sort of ascension relies on them sort of saying that like we're not kind of the far left, we're not Corbyn, like, you know, I mean, you know, we actually got rid and detoxified the party from those destructive forces. And so to then you know, to stick to that narrative means you sort of have to almost, or like, you know, strategically you kind of have to let the extreme right kind of let them have their day, and let's really hope that like, oh yeah, they're going to be so incompetent and so foolish that like no one will like find them like, you know, lucrative.
There's no way that a Labour Party that champions actual democracy in the sense of like, you know, democracy in the workplace, democracy that represents the ability to actually change how things in society are run by your average person rather than vested interests who are, you know, going to fight against that kind of thing tooth and nail. You are going to end up with exactly what we've got now, which is a Labour Party which is completely dependent upon the media and the media's portrayal of the absolute non-policies that Labour stand. Fucking bikes and energy drinks, like, okay, dude, like this is gonna completely save your government in over the next 5 years of these completely radical policies that are going to make someone's life change in some way. But like, so when this media support disappears, as it inevitably will, what happens? Like, are we gonna see a Labour government in 2029, or are we going to see massive gains by the far right? I mean, I saw a poll that had Reform on 17 points and the Conservatives on 18. Like, the dial is being turned in one direction only, as we all know.
For the interest of time, I wanted to skip through the rest of the report, but I do want to focus on the stuff at the end, which is the things that Woodcock recommends to say. This is the things that we need to do in order to respect the right to protest, but also keep our democracy and specifically also journalists safe from the baying mobs who are the far left. How
many of them involve football stadiums?
Well, basically, the first one is, I'm just going to read it because it's, the government should classify both terrorism and extremist threats by ideology based on an assessment of the actors' understanding of the issue around which they are seeking to change, i.e. the problem as they see it, 2, their tactics and personnel for achieving this change, and 3, the nature of the intended outcome, i.e. the world they want to create. Ideology should not be narrowly determined by the actor's problem diagnosis because this can lead to wider links with extreme left ideologies being overlooked, i.e. if you want to make actual substantive changes to the way the British state is run, and I genuinely think at this point he means stuff like privatized water, it needs to go that far, and then because you are
literally
privatized
any
water,
meaningful...
privatized rail is a part of the British state, and that can never be threatened. So also if you this is also from the recommendations. Notice the scale of what needs to be protected according to Woodcock in this report, from whom it must be protected, and how it should be done. This is quite sort of a list low down, and this is the stuff that he thinks should be. This is the sacrosanct stuff that must be protected in the future as well. Quote, the government should put liberal principles at the heart of how it confronts extreme protest movements. Again, these include Black Lives Matter and pro-Palestine solidarity marches. These principles are upholding parliamentary democracy and the rule of law, defending free expression and the free press, and not supporting or advocating for hostile states and non-state actors. So basically, parliamentary democracy.
Is it illegal to get someone from outside of the country to come in and speak at your fucking rally now? Is that what he's trying to say?
Well, we sort of skimmed through a lot of this report.
It's very convenient that definition therefore excludes supporting a formation of a Palestinian state.
Yes. Basically, the jump goes, if you... Hamas is a non-state actor. If you protest against the genocide...
Actor? Why is it a non-state actor again? Can anyone tell me why?
You're too pretty to ask those questions, Alistair. It's so the jump goes, Hamas is a non-state actor that wants a Palestinian state. If you protest at a Free Gaza motion, you are by extension advocating for a position that Hamas holds, i.e., and then therefore that should not be supported by the government, and then therefore you are in extremis and beyond the pale. It works like that basically in practice.
Wow.
Yeah, it's the all vegetarians are Hitler argument, but somehow even fucking worse.
He does go further, by the way. This is the next couple of sentences. This means central and local government committing not to fund, work with, nor consult with groups that do not commit to legal means to secure change, or who engage or facilitate intimidation or harassment. I.e., if you're a renters union who put a picture of a landlord up and saying this guy is put the rent up by a factor of 5 for no fucking reason.
Jesus Christ.
That means the local council should no longer ever work with you, or fund you, or talk to you, or consult with you. It goes like that.
So the number of Palestine Action people who've been arrested. Remind me again, how many of those people got acquitted? So at what point do your tactics become illegal? Is it when you're arrested, when you're charged, or when you're acquitted?
That's a good point that you mentioned, because later on in the recommendations, here we go. The courts, because they have acquitted Palestine Action people, pretty much needs muzzling further, and certain decisions should no longer be taken by independent judges. Quote, The Lord Chancellor and the Lady Chief Justice should convene a process to examine the potential issue of juries and judges acquitting defendants and judges applying laws differently when they transgress in the name of progressive causes like climate change or anti-racism, i.e., there should be further restrictions.
Everyone actually agrees with me. Defense doesn't work. Yeah. Okay.
No.
Cool.
It's like it's. You remember how part of the way they did the fucking Rwanda scheme was by forcing a law through Parliament that said Rwanda's a safe country. Never mind all that other bullshit you might have heard. This is that, but taking it a step further. It's the same exact process.
Yeah. Don't believe your lying eyes.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Well, I guess it's like sort of classic, like, you're sort of proving a negative isn't the right ways, but like you sort of make the statement and then you're sort of doing the work backwards to kind of make it. I mean, I guess like the simplest term is like, you kind of create your own fiction. And you sort of impose that as a reality. And so like you're constantly having to sort of like prove or like disprove something that is like sort of already been decided. Well, not to sort of like use the like Kafka-esque, because I think that's a little bit hack, but like something along those lines. So
I mean, what are the examples that he cites as like as a problem that needs to be overcome by like basically putting much more like authority and power in the hands of like the police and the Home Office rather than like any courts or even a parliamentary democracy, is stuff like when the Public Order Act and the Crime and Sentencing Bill became law, there was a lot in that about like, you're not allowed to block roads and stuff anymore. So what Just Stop Oil did was they started these slow walking protests. They were no longer sitting on the roads, they were just walking very slowly, and that was legal. So he spends like a lot of pages towards the end of this report saying, actually, we need to
it's
have
not okay to just say, I'm not touching you. Well,
what he says is like there needs to be like a much faster way rather than like laws or judicial processes. Yeah. Like basically he says,
what if we gave the cops a blank check? Well, maybe that would solve it.
Essentially, yes. Or like basically like if you write the law in such a way that like the Home Secretary can just make a determination under their own signature, then it's all fine. You can just do whatever the fuck you want, because then you can be agile and respond to like the next whatever thing that Just Stop Oil does. Or
what we need is Judge Dredd.
in a way, yeah, pretty much. But like but speaking, this is from the selection of when he's talking about Just Stop Oil and how to stop like people or organizations that do those kinds of protests. Let me quote: "When ordinary people are negatively impacted by this form of aggravated activism," which is a hell of a phrase, there is a strong moral argument that they should be entitled to compensation, making those who organize disruptive protests and deliberately cause serious disruption liable for the damages to those who have been the victims of their actions could serve as a powerful financial disincentive. I.e., if you're late for work or your delivery is late, you could sue Just Stop Oil for sitting in the road and like get financial redress for the pain and suffering caused to you.
Cool.
And this genuinely includes businesses being able to sue protesters for damages. So like if I don't know, there's a 200,000 people pro-Palestine demonstration and like a couple of people get out of hand and smash the windows of a Starbucks, then Starbucks has the right to sue Palestine Action and stop the war coalition.
Yeah.
I'm sure you can pull up their details on Company's House.
Well, I was going to say, and then of course, go on. So good. Sorry.
No, sorry, Hussein, you go.
All I was going to say was, of course, this won't be abused in like sort of like the dumbest ways possible, or in like the most vindictive and vengeful ways possible. Yeah. So I was just thinking as you were saying it, like, the thing that we were sort of saying earlier about like the kind of war and antisocial behavior also kind of being a way of like, oh, I just don't want to see people in places where like, I don't want to see people outside because they make me annoyed and angry. Because like, at what point is it like, just the existence of a protest, because I guess the argument, one of the sort of things that they propose, like along the lines of, well, if like the existence of a protest makes it inconvenient for someone to like go to a store, for example, then like arguably that can sort of be kind of that's actually violence in and of itself, and therefore they can they can sue the protesters and stuff. And like, yeah, I don't see any world where this isn't sort of used particularly eventually, not at least because, and I guess like the other point that I was going to make was, well, in terms of the protests that I've seen that have actually caused violence, most of them have been like the fairly recent far right ones, right? Those are the ones where, and so
a bunch of coked up football hooligans like going after the Met because they need something to kick,
right? And so it's sort of like, I'm interested to sort of see how that kind of plays out, not least because like, if this is what it sounds like is like, these are laws that are sort of designed to kind of punish and disincentivize like left-wing protest because the tactics will sort of be deemed to be like automatically illegal or whatever. But like if the effects of it actually target the people that it wasn't intended to be, like, I'm curious about how that would work, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, the intention is to at all points like maintain the facade of that you are being allowed to protest, but never to interrupt anybody. Like, if the point of a protest is in some way to like cause a disruption or an interruption or an annoyance to either people in power or in the street to like focus attention on your cause in the very broadest sense, then they want to make sure that disruption, that like the turning of the gaze of an audience or the media onto an object, a cause that you feel passionate about, is no longer would be no longer allowed to do that. There's just I wanna rattle this off. So I'm quickly want to like mention one or two more things that he also thinks need to be done. Is specifically stop pro-Palestine demonstrations because, quote unquote, these are a incitement to hatred and glorify violence and terrorism. He wants to, despite the ongoing spy cops, inquiry, he wants to expand the use of spy cops yet again. And then finally, and we'll just leave it here. He had one more important thing: is he thinks that the counter-extremism czar position should be made permanent in government and be given a much larger budget.
Well, physician, heal thyself, I guess.
Yeah. So, yeah. I mean, again, to just wrap up, like I said at the start, the point of this report is not to be read or understood by most or pretty much anyone. It's something to point and say, like the cast review, is to say, we have evidence and therefore we are going to do this thing.
Fundamentally, the problem is that protests, and much like striking, are effective and therefore should be banned.
Yeah.
Yeah, like theoretically you have this right, but if you exercise it, we will come down on you like a fucking sack of
bricks. If you do anything that actually is effective, then by definition you are doing terrorism of a kind, and therefore we should have your head stamped.
We gave you parliamentary fucking shit. Petitions. We gave you parliamentary petitions. Why not just use that website and stay home?
I think like an important.
Did John McDonnell get in here?
I think an important thing to bear in mind, like especially like as we sort of head like the end of the episode, because I don't know I think you touched on it, although I'm not sure whether I misheard. But it's like the idea of like what these reports actually sort of represent, and I think the cast review is like a really good example of that. But also, like just any kind of think tank review, right? Or like think tank report and stuff, because it's really, I think it should really be considered part of like an assemblage, which is more about like the way in which that information is distributed. So like, again, like, from like a media perspective, when think tanks sort of send these reports, like no journalist really reads them. And so like, they'll sort of read like the first few pages, but that's kind of it.
They'll get an executive summary in the email probably.
Yeah, and the importance is not like, and again, like, to go back also to like, the incompetence of journalists and like, the incompetence of like mainstream reporters to kind of hold these types of groups to account, is very much like, it very much kind of feeds into it. What I was going to say, what else was I going to add? I think it's like the development of this kind of assemblage of to basically justify what I would kind of describe as like vigilantism, right? And I think this was used a lot in like, Tory governments where they weren't really able to pass anything through, like particularly like, stuff to do with the Rwanda bill and everything, and then the sort of subsequent, attacks on lawyers, attacks on activists, and like that kind of continuing. and they can use the sort of justifications that, this kind of very important, serious think tank did a very neutral study where they sort of got all this data, and this data shows that all the left wing people want to sort of impose climate Stalinism, whatever. I think there's better examples of this. But the whole point is not so that policy can be implemented, at least in this iteration. I don't know what a Labour Party with an actual Stalinist majority would do in this instance, or how it would work. But I think the point is just these types of reports are there to reinforce who the cultural enemy is, and really just giving signals to vigilante groups to be because these institutions are failing you, of course, we're not going to call you far right. We're going to call you ordinary citizens standing up for the right to drive on a motorway or something, or the right to sort of be kind of uninterrupted in your sort of mundane activities.
And I think posting AI generated pictures of exiled bullies on Facebook.
That's right. That's correct. And if you have to see footage from Gaza in the midst of doing that, then that's actually violence on you, right? But no, the point is just it sort of builds up this kind of case for even if the policies don't sort of lay out, it's a way of kind of developing the archetype of the people that you are supposed to hate. And I think looking at these types of reports, it should sort of only be understood in those ways. If kind of the Labour Party decides to sort of introduce policies as a result of it, then that's kind of an added extra. But the way that I'm sort of seeing it is in the same way as Prevent, for example, there was no way to implement the things that they were trying to do. The reason why it has been a failure is because it fails on its first principles, because it's an epistemological question, right, rather than anything that can sort of be acted in practicality. And in the same way, it's you aren't going to stop these types of protests. You're not going to stop this kind of direct action. There's no meaningful way in which you can use the apparatus of a declining state to do that. But what you can do is sort of just kind of give people these constant reminders of who your enemies are, in the hope that the state might not be able to enact violence on these people in the way that many commentators desire it to be. But if an accident just so happens to take place, and a few people get injured or killed, or mosques get burnt down or something, we can just do tuts, but while silently nodding our heads to agree with it, type of thing, right? I don't know, I think that's kind of what I think.
While the mosque burned down, so everyone knows I agree with it.
And just doing the little wink at the Telegraph journalist who sort of just happens to be there and just happens to know the phone numbers of everyone who did it. Which I know that it's a joke, but it's also kind of not, right? We've seen that sort of happen in the States, and we've also seen the ways in which certain journalists get very, very close to far right figures, and those far right figures sort of running circles around them. There is a lot of precedence for this, and the idea that the British media kind of think that they're immune to, or people in the British media think they're so clever that they can be immune to that. I don't know. I just think expect to see quite a lot of that in a Labour government, and for it to be the most frustrating shit possible, and yet kind of just constantly being gaslit into sort of being told that none of it's happening actually.
Yeah. Anyway, I think before head off, Hussein, if you have a couple minutes, we'll do a quick game of comment or commentariat.
I can do 5 maybe.
Right. Okay. The term right-wing is used chiefly as an insult for anyone who stands against the groupthink of received liberal opinion. Is that comment or commentariat?
Oh, man.
I'm going commentariat.
Yeah,
I'm going commentariat.
That was Melanie Phillips in the Times.
Oh,
fuck me.
Complacent liberals are to blame for rise of right.
I mean...
Yes.
Yeah.
All right. So the intention was to sell jam and not jam handmade by Meghan. Do they have a dog, or are the kids going to test the shampoo? Is that comment or commentariat?
Comment.
That's commentariat. That's commentariat. That's some Daily Mail. Shit.
It's almost soothing to hear people still going crazy over Meghan Markle. I'm going to be honest with you. That's a comment.
Yeah, that was a comment in the Express. And there was also a much worse comment comparing her to a character that used to appear on Robertson's Jam. Because British people are still incredibly fucking normal about that in 2024, it seems.
Jesus Christ.
The only thing we can be sure of is that Labour intends to whack VAT on private school fees, thus crashing the state education system as hard-pressed parents seek sanctuary for their kids in already oversubscribed Bash Street mixed comps. Is that comment or commentariat?
That's commentariat. I think I read that.
Didn't Dandy write this?
Desperate Dan is a Guardian columnist. Yeah, no, that's commentariat.
That was fan favourite Richard Littlejohn, as if you couldn't tell from the mention of the Bash Street, like, fucking there, like.
Yeah.
These lovely straight stripes in the lawn that you want to abolish for the sake of moths, field mice and dandelions are the sign that everything is okay. The war is over. Daddy is here. Is that a comment or commentariat?
Comment, I think.
Commentariat, I think.
Commentariat.
Wasn't it Ian Dunt a while ago who talked about, like, Starmer or something, and when he said daddy's home or something incredibly gross like that? But that feels like a comment.
That was Giles Corran in the Times.
Yes.
Apparently, if you want to rewild your garden, you're some kind of feminazi. I don't know.
Okay,
Jesus
well,
Christ.
good to know.
The similarities are striking. Rebels, mobbed by fans. Best of all, they don't go on about themselves. Unlike Starmer, who compares his childhood in Oxted to the grapes of wrath. Brackets, the Starmers sometimes went short. So what? I know landed gentry who can't pay their bills. Is that comment or commentariat?
Oh, fucking hell. Commentariat.
I might go for comment again, actually.
I'm going commentariat, I think.
That was Tim's... Sorry, go on.
No, that's commentariat.
Yeah, it's Tim Stanley in the Express.
There you go.
I'm really bad at this.
The headline was, Palestinian scarves, pink hair and union badges. Corbynistas out in force to back ex-Labour leader.
Sick.
Right, last one.
Oh.
Is that all it takes in 2024 to be a queen or to have icon behaviour? Icon behaviour is what was exhibited on the beaches of Normandy and why we remember D-Day. Is that comment or commentariat?
Get in!
I'm praying
we will
that's a
slay
comment.
them on the beaches. Yeah. That's commentariat.
I think I'm going to go with comment one more time.
I'm going to go on a wing and a prayer and say that that's actually Keir Starmer writing in the Sun.
That was a comment in the Daily Mail. It was about that
You know
thing
what?
where
I'm relieved.
the woman from Bridgerton got asked about, like, doing nude scenes with her body type.
Oh, yeah.
That fucking slapped, to be fair. She said women with perfect breasts.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. Well, that's your whack. Okay. I hope you enjoyed that.
Thank fuck, free of that. Hell, well, thank you very much, Hussein, for coming on.
No, thank you for having me on. It's always fun to be on here.
Anything you like to plug? Anything coming up?
Yeah, I mean,
doing?
I have a couple of podcasts, Trash Feature, as some people may know, and 10,000 Posts, which is something that fewer people might know, but nevertheless is a show that has a audience, and maybe you would like to be part of that audience. It's a show we talk about, like, tech culture, internet culture, all that type of stuff. So yeah,
It's a good listen.
I think those are the main bits. Yeah, so do check that out if you haven't already.
Awesome. Yeah. Well, from us, patreon.com/praxiscast, one bonus episode a month. Maybe a little more than that. Also Discord access, and you can get us Thursday nights, usually twitch.tv/praxiscast for streams, and merch available, praxiscast.gmail.com. Goodbye.
See ya.
Bye.
Bye.